are the eternal Father. All creation worships you. To you, all angels, all the powers of heaven, cherubim and seraphim, sing in endless praise. Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might. Heaven and earth are full of your glory. The glorious company of apostles praise you. The noble fellowship of prophets praise you. The white-robed army of martyrs praise you. Throughout the world, the Holy Church acclaims you. Father of majesty unbounded, your true and only Son, worthy of all worship, and the Holy Spirit, advocate and guide. You, Christ, are the King of glory, the eternal Son of the Father. When you became man to set us free, you did not shun the Virgin's womb. You overcame the sting of death and opened the kingdom of heaven to all believers. You are seated at God's right hand in glory. We believe that you will come and be our judge. Come then, Lord, and help your people, bought with the price of your own blood, and bring us with your saints to glory everlasting.
So good morning, everybody. And while I'm getting the next screen share up for my slides, I'm going to take a picture of all of you in your red. You look great, church. So I am scrolling through my pictures and seeing all your red. And I've noticed if we've got a few visitors this morning, so welcome to Valerie Harding and Miran and Rosie Montoya. If you're here for the first time, we're so glad you're here. And if you're watching on Facebook in real time, you'll have an opportunity to lift up some prayers later. And if you're watching in Facebook afterwards, we're glad you're watching. Thank you. What a beautiful Pentecost day. I'm going to share my screen. Whoops, wrong share. And we're going to hear the first of our Pentecost lessons.
Susanna, Matilda, and we're going to be reading in Spanish.
My name is Jonathan, and I'm reading in Chinese.
En el último y gran día de la fiesta, Jesús se puso en pie y alzó la voz diciendo: Si alguno tiene sed, venga a mí y beba.
信我的人就如经上所说，从他腹中要流出流水的江河来。
Но это он говорил о Духа, которого получат кто горит в него. Ибо Святый Дух еще не был дан, потому что Иисус еще не был прославлен.
That was the first of our gospel readings. I'm going to be sharing those throughout. So I want to say good morning and thank you, first of all, to all the voices, all the all the readers who recorded themselves ahead of time. A huge thanks to Pastor Zach, who spent a number of hours putting together our videos of the Gospel of John. They're just beautiful, and they are all on our YouTube channel if you want to go see them at a later time. And I have to admit, on this May 31st, I am remembering joyful Pentecosts of years past. We have a profoundly polyglot congregation, and this year is no different. We have, I think, 12 languages for the Gospels. Usually we read them all in this cacophonous noise that mimics what the story we heard in Acts. Pentecost is the feast of the Holy Spirit. It's the red in our doors, the red in our shirts, the fire in our hearts, the pointy hats on our bishops. Pentecost is in everything that we do. And I also have to begin by saying this year is different. We are still doing this in our own houses, in our own rooms. We are still safer at home. And in particular, this week is different, and it's been a hard week. When we hear in the lesson from Acts words that we sometimes might simply gloss over, when we hear those words about, at this sound there was a great rush of wind and of fire, and at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered. When we hear that, I hear it very differently today, or maybe there's just more continuity with what we're seeing in the evening news right now, with protests happening across our country, in our cities, protesting the flashpoint, the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, but protesting so many other things about racism and our country. His death on Memorial Day was no sacrifice for freedom, which is what that day is about. It was a tragedy and a flashpoint, and it was a sign of persistent injustice, of systemic racism. He said he couldn't breathe. We heard, and you'll see again and hear again in your own language, we hear these words from the Gospel of John. Let anyone who is thirsty come to me. Everyone is allowed to breathe and live.
My name is Mother Mary Kate Rejouis, and I will be reading the Greek New Testament.
Mi chiamo Paul Folks e io leggo in italiano.
Maandiko kwa Yohana 37:39. Hata siku ya mwisho, siku ile kubwa ya sikukuu, Yesu akasimama akapaza sauti yake akisema, mtu akiona kiu na aje kwangu anywe.
Chi crede in me, come ha detto la scrittura, fiumi d'acqua viva scorgeranno dal suo seno.
Tuto de epen peritu pneumatos, ho emeon lambanen ho pistu santes es auton hopu, gar he pneuma hoti Jesus udepo edoxaste.
And I have a feeling I forgot to share sound on that first one, right? Can anyone give me a thumbs up? Was there no sound?
It was fine.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah.
I love it when I make mistakes and it's still fine. So here's the thing about Pentecost. In the Acts of the Apostles, the power of God that comes to us, power that comes with wind and fire and chaos and bewilderment, those are familiar to us right now. The power of God that comes to us is the power of understanding. That's what the disciples heard. And as grateful as I am that we have a congregation that has so many languages, it's not the speaking, it's the listening and the hearing where the power is. There is also, in the lesson from Acts, tucked in near the very end, I'll read it for you again. There are words in the text of Acts that we also cannot escape. In the middle, so in that lesson, there's the fire, the chaos, and all of that. And then there's the languages. And it says, and Charlie read this nobly, how is it that we each hear in our own language, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia? Those are geographic regions, not language groups. And then the people around, it says, all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, what does this mean? But others sneered and said, they are filled with new wine, they're drunk. But Peter, standing with the 11, Peter, one of the disciples, Peter, impetuous and foolish everywhere else in the Gospels, probably a kid, probably as someone with fire in his heart, who's just following Jesus. Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. And Peter says this, men of Judea, all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk, as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. So I want you to imagine this for a second. It is a mess. It's terrifying. There's all sorts of voices, and Peter, untried, untested, he hasn't written a single letter in the New Testament yet. He's a fisherman. He stands up and he thinks back to what he remembers from his Sunday school, from his Hebrew school, from his time learning about the wishes and hopes of God. And he remembers the prophet Joel. Now, the prophet Joel, he's one of the minor prophets, one of the 12 shorter books. He's one of the only ones that comes to us without an incident, without a time stamp on it. He's not speaking to a particular destruction of the temple or a particular exile or a particular persecution that has happened to the Hebrew people. Joel is speaking with a cry for all time. He is timeless. And his book is 4 short chapters, mostly of plagues, of suffering, of devastation, of mourning, and then a little bit of hope and a promise. So picture this, young Peter, standing in the midst of a chaotic crowd, stands up and says, listen, people, all you who are here, they are not wrong. This is what was spoken of in the prophet Joel, and then he reads Joel. This is from Joel chapter 4:3 in some texts. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams, even upon my slaves, both men and women. In those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. We cannot escape yet the legacy of slavery. Yet even in Joel and even Peter, that is what he remembers. God promises that God will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and goes so far as to say even the slaves. There is a breadth and a hope and an inclusion in that we cannot forget, because we cannot and have not yet forgotten. Some translations for us use men servants and maid servants instead of slaves. I do not like those translations. I would rather have the honest truth. And so we have, again, woven through the Old Testament, the Hebrew Testament, the New Testament, the Spirit we have now, we have woven through this promise that the Spirit, the promise of God, the goodness of God is for all flesh. and the power of the Spirit, the coming of the Spirit on Pentecost today, the coming of the Spirit on that first Pentecost is in fact God's continued protest that all of God's children are not free and that Jesus's death was wrong. You see, the legacy of slavery in our country is that pernicious, persistent racism carries on. And it is the burden of people whose skin color is like mine to boldly and bravely dismantle what is unjust. We have a small group at St. Aidan's that has been doing this by reading, talking, praying. You'll have a chance to hear from that group in a few weeks. We want to share with you our conversations around a book called The Cross and the Lynching Tree. None of this will happen in one day, 1 year, one sermon. If only that were the case, right? But it will never happen without one sermon, 1 day, 1 year, one group, one step, one moment, one change. Anti-racism work is gospel work, and it is deeply, deeply in the scriptures. Uh-oh. I will come back to that in a moment. Charlie, can you send me through the text the link to that video, and I will fix that. Oh wait, that's not Charlie, that's Zach. All right, I will carry on and we will come back to that because you have to hear that. So in the Gospel of John, we also hear these words. Out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water. Now he said this about the Spirit, which believers in him were to receive, for as yet there was no Spirit, because Jesus was not yet glorified. Out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living waters. I want to come back to this idea of understanding, this idea of Pentecost. So the Pentecost story reminds me of a video on YouTube that's 13 years old. That's like forever in YouTube terms, right? And it's a tribute video to many countries throughout the world who have put on productions of Les Miserables. And Les Miserables is, of course, the musical version of the lengthy book by Victor Hugo. I haven't read the book. I have only seen the show, and it is very dear to my heart. And so they gather on stage actors from countries around the world, actors who have played the protagonist, who have played Jean Valjean, to sing a song. It is the song of the French Revolution. I'll give that to you in a minute. I can't actually show the video during the sermon because then I violate YouTube copyright, and then we'll get sued like 5 years from now. But I will show it at the beginning of coffee hour. So just working with the times. And here's the thing about understanding. This song is a beautiful song. I'm going to put the words up here, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Kim just sent it to me. And it goes like this. Do you hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men? It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart echoes the beating of the drums, there is a life about to start when tomorrow comes. You see, it's a song of the French Revolution, which is the backdrop to Les Miserables. Les Miserables is a story of all the stories in between of love and fidelity and mercy and sacrifice and hope. And so in this video, actor by actor, language by language, each person steps forward and sings a little bit. And here's the thing, even if you don't know the song, even if you don't know the language, you hear the song. Even if you don't know the language, you hear the spirit in the song, and you hear the spirit of hope. You hear this stirring longing for a new time. And that, I think, is what Pentecost is for us when we are at our very best. We hear in those words, even when we don't understand the language, we hear, let all who are thirsty have water. Let all who out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living waters. Let everyone breathe. In the other gospel for Pentecost, Jesus breathes his spirit and his peace on the disciples. It is inescapable. And so for us, the song is a familiar song. It is the hope of Jesus. It is the longing for freedom. It is what we have heard throughout the ages. Now, I also have to say a few things about what is happening now with our bishop and the other bishops of the Lutheran Synod and the Methodist Church. I do not condone violence from any party. I will share that message in my weekly email. Those bishops said, we join our voices to renounce violence from state protesters, from organized groups, from individuals. I do not long for a revolution as bloody as the French Revolution. I will say that. I do long for change, and I do want change. I also know that this is a confusing time because in many ways we have come so far. Our presiding bishop is Black. Our own bishop is. I also know that they, along with me, fear for our children and especially our boys every single time they walk down the street. Those are both true at the same time. I want change, and I want to listen to and hear and understand that song that we recognize deep in our heart, the song of Isaiah 61 that Jesus read when he first taught in the temple. I have come to proclaim liberty to the captives, freedom to the poor, recovery of sight to the blind, and healing to the sick. That is the song of the Spirit and the song of the church. The song that we hear in Psalm 104, the Spirit will renew the face of the earth. So let's listen again.
My name is Ingrid Fotino, and I'll be reading in Romanian.
My name is Kate. I'm reading in Japanese.
My name is Joe, and I will be reading in English.
祭りの終わりの大事な日に、イエスは立って叫んで言われた。誰でも乾く者は、私のところに来て飲むがよい。
Cine crede în mine, din inima lui vor curge râuri de apă vie, cum zice Scriptura.
Now he said this about the Spirit, which believers in him were to receive. For as yet there was no Spirit, because Jesus was not yet glorified.
So disciples, on this Pentecost, this is my word of hope to you. And then I'll take a moment to track down the third video so you can see those people as well. A broken world awaits us. A broken world awaits the Spirit. A broken world awaits our understanding, our willingness to be vulnerable, our willingness to change. Our broken world awaits our hope, our love, the way of love, our persistence, our nonviolence, and our transformation. We are all like Peter. We can stand in the midst of chaos and say, people around me, they are not fools. They are not wrong. This is what is promised, that the Spirit will come upon all flesh and will change the world. Amen. I'm going to pause for a moment and see what I did on YouTube.
It wasn't you. It's just the way the playlist is. If you click the last link I sent you, it's the right one. It's just, okay. It's on Zach's channel instead of on ours.
Great. Thank you, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all give a cheer to Kim for managing all that she is managing during this time.
Thanks, guys.
We're all really grateful. Okay.
My name is Meg Holiday.
All right, I am sharing this and you will get to hear these languages.
I'm reading in Haitian Creole.
My name is Charlie Martin. I'll be reading in Latin.
Hello, I'm Durango Jenkins and I will be reading in French.
Dernier jour fête là, c'est lui qui était plus important. Jour ça, Jésus campait devant foule mounio. Li dit au bien fort. Si on moun soif de l'eau, li met vin jouen moi, li met vin bois.
Qui credit in me, sicut dicit scriptura, flumina de ventre eius fluent aquae vivae.
Il dit cela d'esprit qui devenait recevoir ceux qui croyaient en lui, car l'esprit n'était pas encore parce que Jésus n'avait pas encore été glorifié.
So I do have just a couple of announcements this morning, and then we'll have the peace and an offertory, and we'll continue on with the service. I have to say, leading these services from this space here, the hardest part is making these transitions because it's still always just me talking. So I appreciate your patience and your kindness with that. The announcements I have are mostly pointing out things that will be coming out in the email that comes out tonight or tomorrow. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, welcoming and inviting people to church in our online era, which is going to last for quite a while. And even when we are regathering in some way, we will continue to worship online with many of our households. I'm understanding. So I'd like some help because I am always on the administrative end of this. I have no idea what the experience is like in many ways. So in your email, you'll find an announcement about a workshop called Invite, Welcome, Connect. These are folks that have been doing some evangelism work in the Episcopal Church for about 5 years and using lots of different ways. On Wednesday, June 10th at 1 in the afternoon, there's a 90-minute webinar. I would love to have about 10 of us, 10 of you, go to that and share what are some ideas about how to welcome, how to incorporate, how to invite in our online era? It's important to us as a congregation that we do that. And I need some help because I have no idea what the experience is like from the other side of the Zoom. I do go to some other Zoom things and I know what bugs me, and so I try not to do those things with you, but I'm sure I have a whole lot more to learn there. There will be a few other announcements in the weekly e-bulletin. A new offering by Cathedral Ridge for sanctuary or safer at home, but at Cathedral Ridge if you are looking to get away but not really travel this summer. There's some good options there. And a couple of other things. So look for that, and I'll include links for things that I mentioned in the sermon. That's really all I have to share today. So, Kim, can you unmute everybody? This is my favorite part. Maybe.
The button's gone.
May the Zoom just never fails to amuse. May the peace of the Lord be always with you.
And also with you.
Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.
Peace with Let's try that again. May the peace of the Lord be always with you.
And also with you.
Also with you.
Also with you.
Peace be with you.
Peace.
Peace be with you. Peace, everyone.
Be with you. Just wave. Yeah.
Peace. I think we unmuted.
Peace be with you.
We're unmuted now.
Peace of the Lord.
Oh, peace. I'm unmuted now.
Peace be with you. There we go. No, God's peace be with everyone.
Peace.
Go.
Peace.
Try unmuting yourself. You might be able to do it.
Yeah, you should be able to now.
Peace be with you from
Peace,
Lafayette.
everyone. Peace. Peace.
Wow. Leave it to Zoom to update in the middle of church.
Right?
Isn't that amazing? All right, well, we're going to mute everybody again, and Sarah's going to play something briefly for the offertory, and then we'll continue with the Apostles' Creed and our prayers.